Is Nigeria safe? Hey YouTube, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Tia, and amongst many things, I am the owner of Kabo, a company that makes travel to Nigeria, and I hope one day all of Africa easy. It is the most asked question that we get. Is Nigeria safe? People ask me this like once a day. And I don't want to give a short response. I don't want to give like a one-word response because honestly speaking, it is a question that is influenced by so much misconception, misinformation, that I feel like it takes a few minutes to address all of that and unpack all of that. So I'm taking this video once and for all to respond fully and exhaustively to the question, is Nigeria safe? The short answer is yes, but I just want to take a few minutes to stretch your mind with the long answer. Nigeria is a country that for some reason, despite its diversity, despite its size, is represented by essentially one image. And it's crazy to me because when we're talking about other countries, we're able to conceptualize diversity, we're able to conceptualize size. If we think of the United States of America, we think of a pretty big country with a lot of different people. And so it's impossible to talk about Connecticut when you're talking about Florida. It's impossible to talk about Texas when you're talking about California. People get that, and they don't realize that it's the same thing for Nigeria, but times 10. It was when I was in Africa that I really understood the word diversity, because honestly speaking, there is no Western country that I've seen that actually is diverse with regards to other places in the world. It's crazy because, you know, in the West, we spend all day complaining about diversity, but we don't know diversity. If I'm in Italy, honestly speaking, while Italy is more diverse than you would expect, at the end of the day, 90% of the people are still white, 90% of the people are still Christian, and within that Christianity, they are still Catholic. 90% of the people, if not 100% of the people, their first language is Italian, their second language is maybe English or French. Like, that is not diverse. But even America, honestly speaking, majority of the people are Christian, majority of the Christians are Protestant, majority of the people are white people, majority of the people, ethnically speaking, no matter their heritage, ethnically speaking, most of the people in America are American by now. Because, for example, somebody with Italian ethnicity, maybe their grandparents were Italian, they're a lot more American than they are Italian. And so that's what I mean when I even talk about ethnicity. Because once you start to move out of the West, you see that you have countries like Nigeria where literally there's not a dominant religion, and it's not the only country in the world like that. There are lots of countries throughout Africa and Asia where this is the case. Ethnicity is a huge thing because there were all of these different ethnicities in Africa that, you know, were randomly put together or thrown apart during the scramble of Africa. And so you have a case like Nigeria where you have something like 500 different ethnic groups and 100 different languages. Quite literally speaking, like I said, there's no dominant religion. People's first languages tend to be the first language of their ethnicities. Aside from like the latest generation, they tend to be first native speakers of Igbo or of Yoruba, and then they learn Pidgin, and then people that are privileged enough to go to school would speak the Queen's English. So like, honestly speaking, what we in the West term as diversity, which is honestly speaking having a almost absolute majority with very visible minorities, is not the same as other places in the world, such as Nigeria, where they're actually diverse, because there's the Muslims and the Christians have to coexist. There can't be a dominant one because you're 50-50. You have to learn and find some sort of common de facto language, because how else can you coexist with 100 different languages? I didn't even touch on like the political beliefs that came with these ethnicities. I didn't touch on the fact that the Igbos were more democratic, whereas the House of Fulani in the north were more theological, and while the Yorubas in the southwest had a mix of the theocracy and the democracy and monarchy. All of this to say, you cannot generalize Nigeria. It is too diverse, and it is also too big. Even its size gets skewed by the fact that we're used to a map that is drawn and doesn't show the actual size of Africa. And so when you look at Nigeria, and for example, let's take Italy, you would think based off of this map that they are pretty close in size, but the actuality is that Nigeria is 3 times larger than Italy. The distance between the southwestern edge of Nigeria and the northeastern edge of Nigeria is the same distance from Milan to Ukraine. There is a full-scale war in Ukraine right now, but that's not stopping you from going on vacation in Milan or Switzerland or other places. A lot of the images that you see with regarding insurgency or insecurity in Nigeria is actually concentrated to, for example, the northeast, the distance between the northeast and the southwest. It's very far. It's very far. You're not going to a place where there's Boko Haram, actually. Again, adding context to this, you have to understand that your safety is also dependent on your lifestyle and your class. That's something that I've learned in moving through different societies. So if you are in a big city, even if you're in the northeast, where we'll say that there are more insecurity issues with respect to like the southwest, even in the northeast, if you're in a bigger city, it's going to be completely different than if you're in a small village. A lot of the things that you see are happening in the more rural areas of the northeast. So how do you generalize that to a country that has huge mega cities that isn't necessarily the northeast? When I am in Italy, I am a middle class person, very middle class, which means that my lifestyle is such that I am using public transportation a lot because I can't afford, and I also don't really want to have private transportation. And because of this, it means that I'm exposed to the outside more. And furthermore, add to the fact that I am visibly not ethnically Italian. I think that these are the true reasons as to why I've had issues in the past that if you're a longtime subscriber to this channel, you have seen. I have been robbed in Italy. I have been pickpocketed in Italy. I have experienced a racist attack in broad daylight in Italy. None of those things ever happened to me in Nigeria. And I'm not going to say it's because one is safer or less safe than the other. I'm going to say that it's because in Nigeria, I have a status, I have a lifestyle that allows me to be less exposed. I am typically in a private car with a vetted driver when I'm in Nigeria. And furthermore, because of my face, I look like the other 20 million people in Lagos or the other 200 million people in Nigeria. I'm not really a target the way I am in Italy. This is all to say that a lot of safety is based on perception, and it's really subjective, because if you then come to Italy and you talk about Milan, a lot of Italians that don't live in Milan will say, oh my God, Milan is so dangerous. How do people live there? Oh my God. But honestly speaking, aside from those first few years, like, yeah, the racist attack happened 3 years into my Italian experience, and the robberies were even before that. Once I got used to living here, once I became a bit more Milanese in the way that I carried myself and the way that I approached things, nothing has ever happened to me again. I live in what many people in Milan and Italy would consider the ghetto of Milan, and yet nothing has ever happened to me, and I don't feel unsafe because of my lifestyle, because of my experiences, because of the way I carry myself in those environments. Same thing in Nigeria. I think that if you were somebody that was using public transportation more frequently, if you stuck out more because you maybe didn't look like a Nigerian, then your perception of safety and the probability of things happening to you would be different. So all of this is a really roundabout way of saying Nigeria, generally speaking, is different. It's large, it's vast, and while there are some places that are plagued by insecurity issues, and generally speaking, the insecurity in Nigeria it needs to be a priority of the government. It needs to be fixed. That being said, there are other parts of Nigeria that I would hazard to say are even safer than in the West. Somebody once told me, they were like, yeah, but if you look at the statistics, if you look at the average homicide rate in Lagos, it's still higher than New York. And I'm like, you guys, it all comes down to what I'm saying. You cannot take averages in a place like Nigeria, where there is so much diversity, where it's so huge, where it's also very unequal. You can't take an average, because the average is not going to take into account the inequalities. Lagos is another highly stratified city. You have the island that is one side of the extreme, and you have some parts of the mainland that are the complete other side of the extreme, and then there are all the things in between. So even that average that you're taking, it's taking the average of the mainland and it's taking the average of the island. Meanwhile, your average tourist would be on the island. They would be in the safest parts of the city. So their reality is not one that you can say, it's not one that you can describe by a mean statistic. I guess that the message that I would really try to convey is you can't generalize a country like Nigeria. You cannot generalize a place that was literally hundreds of different kingdoms with different languages, different religions, different political systems that were put together. Don't underestimate just how big Nigeria is. Nigeria is a huge country with a huge population. And so because something happens in one part, because something is one part's reality, you cannot generalize that to the entire part. And again, as a tourist coming to Nigeria, you're typically not going to be the middle-class Nigerian. You're not going to see the middle-class Nigerian's reality. None of this is to downplay the real issues that there are in Nigeria. Nigeria has real insecurity issues. Nigeria has real issues with inequality. It has real issues with classism. It has real issues with tribalism. It has real issues with so many different things. But I just don't think that somebody that is truly curious enough to want to explore Nigeria, to maybe want to visit Lagos, see a bit more of the things, the good things, the few good things that they're seeing about Nigeria in the media, I don't think that somebody that wants to see that from up close should be nervous or scared, because the reality that you're going into in Nigeria is very far from the reality that you see on TV or in the media. And it's a cool reality that you should experience, especially if you are a Black person in this world. Because if you're gonna go to Mexico, you're gonna go to Brazil, you're gonna go to India, I have no idea why you would be afraid to go to Nigeria. From my experience, those are not places that are safer than Nigeria. And also, this could be because of what my family has told me and how my family has conditioned me and my perception. But I find Jamaica to feel way less safe, Kingston, Jamaica specifically, to feel way less safe than Lagos, Nigeria. Yet people still go. People are traveling from all over the world to go to Kingston, Jamaica, and they're fine. The one thing certain in this life, aside from death and taxes, is change. Change is inevitable, and for some reason, despite this inevitability that we all know and acknowledge, people can't seem to acknowledge that maybe Nigeria has changed. The image that they're seeing of Nigeria is an image that is honestly 30 plus years old. When my dad left Nigeria in the 80s, 90s, there was a military dictatorship. They were still reeling from the 1970s Civil War. There was a lot going on, and it was definitely not a place that I think I would have been able to thrive in. But in the past 30 years, there has been a lot of change, a lot of development. And even if the last few years have been tumultuous, I think Nigeria has a very bright near future. And it's funny because my dad, who was so resistant to taking me back to Nigeria, remember, I went to Nigeria for the first time ever in 2019. And in 2019, my dad had been away for 10 years and he was so traumatized from, his childhood. He was traumatized from some bad business experiences, and he was convinced that Nigeria was a done deal for him. But I dragged him back, and can you believe that 5 years later my dad is now planning to retire back to Nigeria? My dad also is very optimistic about Nigeria. My dad is not afraid of Nigeria because I've dragged him to the point where he could see that it has changed. So again, I'm not saying things are perfect, far from it, but I have to push back on this narrative that it is this no man's land. It's just not true. I hope that this video was able to let you understand the truth a little bit better, and the truth is nuanced. And I'd love to hear what you guys think in the comments section down below. If you guys are interested in seeing a bit more about my life as an international girly, be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. And as always, I will see you in my next one. Mwah.